Hey everybody, welcome to the Countdown Depot. My name is the Bard of Shale, and let's talk cartoons. You remember back when you were a kid, still in elementary school? Long weeks, just getting to learning the basics, and, well, not really liking the school day very much? Not liking waking up at the crack of dawn to get on a bus? But the only time of the week you could look forward to getting up early was Saturday morning cartoons? Yeah, I remember those days too. I mean, but back when I was a kid, I never had cable. So I was relegated to watching the standard stuff you'd find on various back channels in my area. All in all, I actually like some of the old cartoons like those. However, as I'm older, sometimes I find that I look forward to seeing what the modern era has to do with, but I also like to look back to the past. And with the internet, I sometimes like to watch cartoons just for reminiscing and nostalgia's sake. However, some of the old cartoons I used to like to watch, I can't really find full episodes of, or I can't find the entire series to watch. And that gets me thinking, which brings us to the meat of today's countdown. Do you have a favorite cartoon you used to like to watch and wish they would make a reboot of if they did it right? Well, so do I. So let's go and see uh, the top 10 obscure cartoons that I wish would they would remake if they did it right. Okay, a quick rundown of events beforehand. I'm going to discuss the original cartoon's overall plot, some new ideas for new fans of the series, and also things to keep original as to not alienate the older fans. And before we get started, some honorable mentions. First one, Phantom Investigators, an interesting stop motion animation style, and it also goes into lore of ghosts and other paranormal type stuff. Oval Mysteries, sort of the same thing, but it delves more into ghosts and government conspiracies and stuff like that. Fairy Tale Police Department, admittedly a little bit childish, but think about it this way: what would happen if all three pigs' houses were knocked down due to faulty construction, or if, well, if I ranted about that, it would take me all day. Capertown Cops. I'm a fan of any police show, but this one's high in slapstick, which you don't see much of these days. Archie's Funhouse. A very old one, but a one that makes me laugh with all the corny jokes in it. Anyway, let's move on. Number 10, Ivor the Engine. Now, if you're like me and are a fan of anything railway related, then you've probably heard of this one. It's a pretty old one. As you know, or as any of you don't know, Ivor the Engine takes place in the top left hand corner of Wales on the Merioneth and London City Rail Traction Company Limited Railroad. And it's run by the little tank engine Ivor and his driver Jones. And there's nothing really much to say about it. There's no big conflicts, just average troubles of a remote town, and Ivor does his best to solve it. No ideas? I can't really think of anything, except maybe they could do with a new engine on the line. Kind of gets boring with the only sentient vehicle being that Ivor, but then again, considering how jealous he sometimes gets, it might be difficult. I would keep basically practically everything the same. There's no need to drag in intense drama. But I digress. While I would love to see this one get a reboot, and I've seen some rumors that that might happen, it's number 10 for the fact that it's not exactly the most obscure thing on this list. Number 9, Robinson Sucro. Now, this one is a rather interesting one. Based on the tales of Robinson Crusoe, this follows our hero in the straw hat who used to work for a newspaper and his editor wanting to, you know, sell more papers. His editor sends him off to an island where he is to write about the various adventures. The island's supposed to be deserted, but basically there's a bunch of pirates and castaways on the island that don't really want their civilization discovered. They just want to live how they want to live. A sentiment that I can kind of get behind. And basically, the major conflict goes where a jealous worker of the newspaper publisher wants to expose the secret so he can take the promotion. Things I'd add. Well, I'm not exactly sure what one could add to a series like this. Personally, I'd probably add I'd probably add like a little bit of more of a modern take to it, like an island recently discovered in modern times, and this took place during the time when sails were still a thing. Yeah, but then again, how would you incorporate classic pirates into it? In any case, uh, you can actually find full episodes of this, but you can't find any in English anymore. There used to be, but apparently, and I looked this up, due to some sort of a lawsuit, all the original English copies were destroyed. It's on the list for the fact that you can't really get it in English anymore. Number 8, Tugs. Again, like Ivor the Engine, if you happen to be a fan of Thomas and stuff, you're most likely a fan of Tugs too. The original Theodore tugboat, you could say, taking place during the Great Depression. Some, I think, it doesn't really say specifically, but I mean, the characters are great. The rivalry between two companies is good, and I mean, and it just doesn't feel like relegated like the original Theodore tugboat. I mean, models. I mean, I'd probably figure out a good animation style to, make everything seem a little more lifelike than just static. But at the same time, you wouldn't want to go the JJ the Jet Plane route where all the faces just look more creepy than they should be. But I would definitely keep the whole prospect the same. And I know by this point you guys are listening and saying that I'm keeping everything the same, but that's the thing with cartoons like these. You can't take away from the charm of it all. I mean, sure, you can add in new ideas and concepts and all that, but you just gotta remember to honor the original material, which is what I can say for a lot of reboots these days. Now, you can find all the, unfortunately, 13 episodes of this available on anywhere, but I mean, I rather respect good storytelling, and this is one that has good storytelling. Number 7, Mummy Nanny. I was a little reluctant to put this one on the list. I mean, I just happened upon it by accident one day, and which is kind of sad considering the fact that I actually like the story in it. We follow the tale of our typical mummy, Nile, who 5,000 years ago, or at least I think it was 5,000 years ago, it's been a while since I've watched it actually, she accidentally stole a friend of hers' shadow and recited a spell inside a temple which turned her into a mummy. She has awoken centuries later, or a millennium later, and ended up as the nanny for two children whose parents are an eccentric writer and a scientist. Now, where this where the plot of this one comes in is simple. There are these three bad men who want the bandages to Nile because if assembled in a correct order, apparently, it leads to a secret treasure somewhere in Egypt. However, by the series' end, this plot line is never explored. and neither is the shadow ever returned to her friend because, you see, apparently the her friend and her uncle in the past can enter the present when someone in the present says a ridiculous pharaoh name. And, but cartoons like these never really did focus on plot, and a lot of changes could be made if this one was ever reboot, not likely. Well, for one thing, they would need to give the characters a little more personality because they all seem bland. And I would also change how they approach the story. I wish they would keep to it. But I mean, I wouldn't change the story itself, just how they went about it. I'm getting topics like these tend to get me all jumbled up. So let's go to number 6. Yeah, I remember this one. Flight Squad was a pretty awesome show. Yeah, pretty interesting. A team of flyers from, I think, a flight school in the opening episode. They do a lot of rescue work, go on a lot of these adventures, and more often than not, they tangle with a ruthless gang of sky criminals, the Barracudas, a lot. To be honest, the it's one of those episodes where they go on different missions uh, every time, and sometimes the bad guys show up, sometimes it's a different bad guy entirely. The details are a little vague because it's been so many years since I've actually seen it. I've managed only been able to find a handful of episodes. I mean, they're in English, sure, but I can only find like two or three. I mean, the roster is lean but refined, but I would probably change the story to make it like, they go on missions ev- like every day, and it seems all right, but they don't. But the general plot is they don't know who's behind it, and by season's end, they have an epic air battle, and the criminals go to jail and all that. There's something simpler. I mean, every time the bad guys get away, and they're never caught by the end. Simple enough, really. Number 5, Ruby Gloom. Oh, now we're getting into the good stuff. And this one isn't exactly obscure, but it's one of those cute little cartoons. Now, I'm a fan of ghost stories and the paranormal and all like that. However, I'm more into the lighter side of things, and I really enjoy a dynamic where things can be simultaneously spooky but fun at the same time. Each episode finds us with the typical gang as they try to solve various problems that come between them. I mean, now, if they were to ever reboot this series, which had about 40 episodes to its name, I would, well, I would say that nothing really needs changing about the general plot, but I wish that we'd go to some more locations. The entire series takes place in the town of Gloomsville, but they never leave their great mansion. I mean, I figure that in the future series, we should see more of the town, at least. But I would like for them to pick up this cartoon again and keep the characters just how they are, no lowering their intelligence like Teen Titans Go. Number 4. Admittedly, the only anime on the list, Gregory Horror Show is a rather interesting kind of thing. I mean, when I first saw this a few months ago during Halloween, I thought it's an interesting concept. Kind of reminded me like a more scary version of the old My Sims games, where everything is all cubed. But what I really like about the general plot of this is, well, the plot goes as follows. Basically, we are in the shoes of a protagonist for the first and second season. They find themselves lost and end up in the Hotel Gregory house, run by the mouse Gregory. And weird things happen that kind of reflect their life. I mean, it's kind of implied that they somehow died and are in a coma. but it's not really spelled out, and they're just trying to deal with all the vices they had in their lives that they kind of regretted. What I like about this one that it delves in deep into concepts of the subconscious and personality and about the self. I really like that deep stuff. I mean, I did see there were plans to bring it back, but I'm not sure about that. There was also an interesting video game about it too, but we're not here to discuss video games. If they ever do bring it back, I wouldn't really want them to change too much. I mean, I've seen some of the designs that are actually quite nice, but I prefer the old blocky style. Gives it a nice retro feel to the early days of CGI. However, if there was one thing I was going to change, I'd probably change the interior layout because it just seems a little bland to me considering it was early CGI days. And they took it straight from the video game, and maybe add like a few more characters or bring some of the one-offs back. But let's get into a more positive thing, shall we? Number three. Now, this one I also recently discovered a few years ago, but I like the overall concept. I'm a big fan of detective shows myself, and I especially like the old fashioned trench coat wearing type. The series follows Ace Hart as he tackles various crimes against the local hoodlums of Dog City. But what gets this thing on the list is its interesting fourth wall breaking. You see, Ace Hart is aware that he's in a cartoon and constantly speaks with his cartoonist Elliot about the general plot and where things going. I kind of find that an interesting dynamic, to be honest. Constantly switching from the cartoon world to the real world in the terms of the show, and the entire thing was created by Jim Henson, who was with the Muppets. Hmm, yeah, interesting like that. So if they were to bring it up to the modern era, you know, update it to a more modern cartoon style with a, but keep the fourth wall thing interacting, but the interactions between Elliot and Ace are priceless. Anyway, moving on. Number two, Patrol 03. Remember what I said earlier about how the some cartoons like Teen Titans Go lower the intelligence and of the characters and make them look a little goofy? Well, this show kind of took that concept early on. However, instead of making the three main characters all goofy and low intelligent, they actually look goofy, but they're actually pretty smart. The general plot it goes as follows. Patrol 03 comprised of Sergeant Shorty, Wilfred the giant mouse or rat. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish between the two of them, and Carmen the fox, I think it is. They're hired by the mayor of the city to discover the hidden crimes that are supposedly being committed by Police Chief Pamela, who wants the mayor's job. Considering the fact that they look so clueless, they use that to their advantage, the and Police Chief Pamela doesn't suspect a thing. Now, I'd probably make it. I'd probably, if I had the say in it, I'd probably, you know, update the animation style a little bit, give the characters a bit of background, stuff like that. But I'd keep the premise, and even though they're goofy, as the theme song says, they're very smart. So I wouldn't want to risk them being downgraded to humor because, and I'll talk about this in one of my shale speculation videos, but have you ever noticed that a lot of law enforcement and rescue services in cartoons and media, they're the police and rescue services are often perceived as incompetent because they're considered more of an obstacle to the hero than an ally? But in any case, this is one cartoon I'd like to see uh, given a reboot, or at least some English dubbing of the old episodes, because I can only find four in English and the rest are in French. Anyway, on to the one I want most rebooted. Number one, the All Star Laugh Olympics. Yeah, I found this one, and I rather like the concept. It takes place all around the world with three teams competing in various silly sporting events. Scooby, Scooby Doo, Yogi Bear, and various other classic Hanna-Barbera cartoons. What I would change is, well, I would probably update the sporting events to be a little more modern, but I'd probably keep the roster, maybe switch out a few characters. I mean, the ones that they focus most on is a team called the Really Rottens, led by uh, Mumbly. Some could say Muttley's cousin. And yeah, I mean, then again, let's hope it doesn't turn out like the Wacky Races if they ever do decide to remake this and make everything about just random events and not sporting at all. But, well, let me get into some more specifics. I mean, if you've ever compared the old Wacky Races to the new one, they don't race anymore. So if they ever brought this show back, I'd want them competing in silly events and, well, you know, if they were just competing in events at the same time as doing random shenanigans that had nothing to do with it, and by the end of the episode there was no clear winner and they forgot there was a race entirely, well, there you go. It's a terrible reboot. But that just about wraps it up for one day.